call the meeting to order. On behalf of the Planning Commission, I'd like to welcome our residents and viewers to this regular meeting of February 11th, 2025. Before we get into our agenda, I'd like to introduce our new commissioner, Mr. Andy Berg. Andy, congratulations on your appointment, and thank you for serving the community.
Yeah, glad to be here, Derek. Thank you.
All right. As we get into the agenda, each February is our organizational meeting. This is where the commission elects their officers and goes through their committee assignments. For the first portion of the election of officers, I'll turn the meeting over to the planning manager, Tony Whippler. Tony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, commission members. Yes, as Chair Roddy had mentioned, this meeting we need to elect a chair and vice chair from the commission. So with that, we'll take it first for chair. I'll take a nomination.
Nomination for Dirk.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Do you accept?
I'd accept it.
All right. And then we will take a nomination for vice chair.
I'll nominate Commissioner Teskey.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Will you accept?
Yes.
All right, that's it, Tony?
That's it for
All
that.
right, well, thank everybody for your vote of confidence. We'll get into the committee assignments, and I'll read through them and ask, and if you're willing to accept, just confirm it, and we'll move on to the next one. We'll take a motion at the end. The first committee, and the commission is represented along with council and some staff when we meet with surrounding townships and the city of Empire. So we look for commission members to serve on each one. The first one is the Empire Farmington Planning Advisory Committee. Commissioner Winchell, will you accept this?
Yes.
All right. The second one is the Castle Rock Discussion Group. Commissioner Teskey, would you be willing to accept that?
Yes.
All right. And then we got the Eureka Planning Group. Commissioner Snowbeck, would you be willing to accept that?
Yes.
The last committee is referred to as the MUSA Review Committee, and to simplify it, it's the extension of sanitary sewer for future growth in our community. It's a larger committee. There's individuals from the school board and the council and staff and all that. So Commissioner Berg, would you be willing to serve on that with me?
Yes.
All right. With that, then, as committee assignments, can I have a motion to assign them as agreed to? Is there a motion?
I'll motion to assign them.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Call the roll, please.
Winchell.
Yes.
Teskey.
Yes.
Roddy.
Yes.
Snowbeck.
Yes.
Berg.
Yes.
All right, now we'll get into our agenda. On tonight's agenda, we have two discussion items. Before we get into the discussion items, we've got a housekeeping item, and that would be the minutes from our January 14th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion for approval, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second, all in favor, say aye.
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 Minutes are approved. All right, we'll move into our discussion items. The first discussion item is the potential beekeeping ordinance. Jared, you're going to take this.
Correct.
All
Thank
right.
you, Chair, Planning Commission members. So at the August 14th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting, a discussion was held regarding a potential beekeeping ordinance. The goal of that discussion was just to get initial feedback from the commission on if there was any interest in pursuing such ordinance. There was interest, but the commission would like to see some information on surrounding communities and their ordinances and comparing them. So staff has collected and compared existing ordinance information from Lakeville, Rosemont, Egan, as well as the Minnesota Hobby Beekeepers Association Model Ordinance. So an ordinance comparison table, along with some common terms, is attached. Staff will kind of summarize how the ordinances were outlined, as well as some of the common requirements that we found. And so after going through that, we are looking for the Planning Commission to review and ask staff any questions that you guys may have. And then we also are looking for direction on if you guys would like to pursue a draft ordinance, or and then what standards you guys would like to see. So just a breakdown of kind of how the typical ordinance outline would look for a beekeeping ordinance. You would have your definitions, permit requirements, performance standards, and then your permit inspection or terminations. And then some of the requirements, performance standards throughout these ordinances was the permit process. So two of them I found that they were annual permits reviewed by staff, with the exception of Lakeville. They did the interim use process for them. The zoning, they're typically allowed in agricultural and single-family residential districts. Colony density, so the number of colonies allowed depends on the lot size. Lots less than 0.5 acres can have a maximum of 2 colonies. A majority of single-family lots in Farmington would meet this threshold. The location of the colonies, typically they're only allowed in the rear yard. And then setbacks, they varied from 10 feet to 20 feet from any lot line. Rosemont allows a minimum of 10 feet, and then Egan has a minimum of 30 feet from an adjacent dwelling unit, deck, patio, swimming pool, or other outdoor living space. When it comes to construction equipment, colonies need to be kept with removable frames and kept in good condition. Materials such as wax comb or other debris shall be promptly removed from the site to prevent robbing from other bees. Any unused equipment shall be secured or stored indoors. In terms of barriers or screening, if a hive is kept within 25 feet of a lot line, a flyaway barrier is required in between the hive and the lot line of at least 6 feet in height, consisting of either a wall, fence, dense vegetation. These barriers force bees to fly upwards out of the hive instead of directly into, let's say, the neighboring lot. In terms of living conditions, each hive or colony shall be provided a convenient source of water. Hives shall be continuously managed to provide adequate and healthy living spaces to prevent swarming. Behavior, if a colony exhibits aggressive behavior, the beekeeper shall promptly determine the cause and correct it. This includes requeening if required. A nucleus colony, so for each colony allowed, there may be 1 nucleus colony in a hive. A nucleus colony, from what I've read, kind of helps get the hive or the colony up and going. And then so for beekeeper education, the applicants must demonstrate they have a complete full course on beekeeping. As I've read, it's a pretty, there's a lot of components that go into beekeeping, so having a requirement on beekeeper education would be necessary. And then some other requirements that I found was that fruit trees and other flowering trees may not be sprayed while in full bloom with substance harmful to bees. And then also if the beekeeper provides a service throughout the city by removing a swarm of bees from an undesirable location, they shall be allowed to temporarily house a swarm for no more than 30 days. In terms of inspection, the city may inspect the property at any reasonable time to determine compliance with the ordinance. And then termination, permits will terminate if expired. There's a transfer of ownership of the property if a violation of the ordinance or permit requirements is occurring or a public nuisance has been declared. So if the commission has any questions for staff on the ordinance comparisons, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I look for feedback on potential requirements that the commission would like to see in an ordinance.
All right, thank you, Jared. Nice job. And the reason, just to give a little background, the commission asked for comparison is you want some kind of consistency. And if you can look at neighbors, what they're doing, especially if this is new to our community, we don't have to be the first one to learn it, but so that's why, what I thought we could do is first go through questions if you got something unique, and then maybe to help staff go through it, we'll kind of walk through some of the different requirements that Jared laid out and try to come to some kind of consensus on what direction before we get into a public hearing with the, with the residents and stuff and send it on to our city council. And I'm alluding that more than likely we'll come with an ordinance, but that's still to be considered also, so I don't mean to take that advantage, but we'll start with Commissioner Teskey.
So thank you for pulling together the comparisons of the other communities. It was really helpful and relevant in kind of making some of the decisions for me around what we should move forward with. I was excited to see that properties of less than a half an acre actually can support 2 colonies. That was surprising to me. I didn't expect that. Based on what I'm seeing in other communities. So my only other question would be with regard to enforcement or inspection. Is that going to be then similar to chickens, complaint-based, or would there be a yearly inspection that happens or an annual inspection that happens with that? Do we know?
I would assume that it would be complaint basis and there would be, since if it would be an annual permit, we would do an annual inspection as well.
And then would the city require any education on that, or is?
As, in my opinion, yes, there would need to be, obviously, more education on staff side
Yeah.
to perform the inspection, but, you know, on the same side, the applicants, part to them being informed on, you know, their requirements that they have to keep up with as well.
Got it. Okay, that's it for me.
And you'll have another opportunity later. Commissioner Winchell?
No, I just think, like Commissioner Teskey said here, I think education, I think, is key, I think, to this whole thing. I certainly don't know a lot about it. I can't imagine a lot of residents do. And I think it could do more harm if, you know, the applicant doesn't know something about bees and tries to raise them. I think, you know, just looking at the setbacks, you know, I like Egan's, what they have, the 30 feet, just with decks, patios, pools, you know, because these are gonna be in the backyard. So I think that, you know, does it have to be 30 feet? You know, that's something we could certainly discuss, but I like that requirement or setback. And as far as the inspection part, so if the city, you know, wants to inspect with any, you know, any reasonable amount of time to determine compliance, can they, what happens if they say, no, you can't, you know, what are we gonna do if they say, no, you can't come check the compliance of my hives? Is it then, does the permit just null and void and over with, or?
We would probably pursue additional enforcement routes if, you know, they were being difficult, if we couldn't go and inspect the site and enforce the permit requirements that they signed off on, we would probably pursue additional
Right.
enforcement
Or
measures.
would there be like a, you know, a fine print at the bottom, you know, failure to allow city to inspect terminates us?
Right, that could be, that's typically how we would do that. We, even with like our urban chicken permit, if they fail to comply, that permit can terminate.
Okay.
If we determine that they're, you know, being unreasonable or not doing what they need to do to keep up with the regulations, those permits can be terminated. It's all in how you write the ordinance and essentially the application as well.
Sure.
And being this is a completely new ordinance, the Plan Commission and Council have quite a bit of latitude as to how you as a group or as the city want to have this ordinance structured. So as far as the inspection or the termination, that can all be laid out in the ordinance.
And I think that's probably a good thing, just to save city and staff time, you know, if they don't wanna comply with an inspection, then, you know, have that in the permit saying, well, then you're done. No, that's it for now, for me.
If the commission agrees, I kind of like Phil's suggestion, and so that we don't forget about it, Jared, I think that should be included if we do proceed with an ordinance,
Okay.
so, if the commission agrees, so. All right, Commissioner Snowbeck?
Yeah, all good questions, and thanks for your work. Couple things, you know, I look at some of the surrounding cities have fees, and I think if we're doing inspections, there should be maybe some sort of fee, right? And then I think that solidifies that they're gonna be, you know, they're invested in doing this. So what's your guys' recommendation on a fee for if they are? I'd have to look for chickens. Is there a fee for chickens?
We do have a fee for chickens,
Yeah.
correct?
Would you foresee it to be very similar to that?
More than likely,
Okay.
yeah.
And the council would set the fees?
Council does set the fees, yes.
Yeah.
I believe it's
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It'd be
$100
similar, if
for
not
the,
Identical.
Yeah.
For the initial permit.
correct.
Yep.
Just one thought on the whole, looking at this matrix of surrounding cities, I do like the Egan setup where it's pretty specific. Some of the other surrounding cities are less specific, and you know, it's something we can always update throughout time if we find that we've been too specific, right? I just liked, when I looked at Egan, I kind of felt like I understood what they were, the goals of it were, because it was more specific. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but I did like that it was specific. And the last thing is, I just see, what if there's a grievance of a family that continues to have problems with bees? They have a pool, they have whatever, playground for their children. What would a grievance look like? They would approach the city? Is there a process if there's a grievance of bees causing issues in their yard?
Correct. We would probably receive a complaint, and then we would go out and inspect, and then make a determinable cause at the staff level if it was either trying to make the connection between the hive itself to that issue, or if it's naturally, because bees, occur naturally in the environment. That's definitely the toughest part that we would have to distinguish if it's strictly coming from the hive itself, or if it's just bees in general in the environment. That would probably be a challenge for us to determine that if that came up.
But it would be something that we'd have to at least monitor and go out and look at, so.
So what would it look like to terminate someone's permit, if there's continued issues over a summer period, 5 incidents, or like, how does that, just trying to picture what this looks like if a hive is infringing on neighbors' properties. Do you guys know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know that we have that exact answer for you this evening. That's something that we can work through with legal counsel as we if this goes to a draft ordinance, we can certainly try to address that in the ordinance, work with our legal counsel to see what that process would look like. And we would certainly want to include that kind of as an outline within that ordinance as well. So yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for you on that specifically tonight. That's something we certainly will work towards achieving if this does go to the next stage of actually developing an ordinance. We'll want to include that in that ordinance and make sure that the commission is comfortable with whatever we initially put in that ordinance. So
It'd be nice if a community member approached us and they were having issues. There's a defined process, and if A, B, and C occur, this might
Absolutely.
give us reason to inspect and possible removal if things haven't changed. Like, maybe there's ways that beekeepers can install their walls. We'll make sure it's not flying towards the neighbors. All those things, because we want good citizens that have beehives to do a good job of protecting neighbors along with their own hive too. So,
absolutely.
yeah. I think the barriers to me seem interesting, to force them to fly higher, not knowing a whole lot of bees. So as you guys look into that, will you figure out like what that looks like?
That's a good question, and that, no doubt, will have to be addressed. I mean, it's similar to if you, in other ordinances, I'll use again the chicken one, if they become a nuisance to the neighbors, and what are the response of the city, and eventually to that property owner that has the permit. But go back to your question on ordinance, and in the past, I think the commission and the council, without too much government reach on an ordinance, sometimes it's easier to include more up front and take away rather than trying to add later on when there's a problem and you didn't think about it. So I think initially what we've done is we've maybe included some things, and then no doubt future commissions, future councils will maybe say, okay, it seemed like a good idea, but it's not much, necessary anymore to have this in there. So, we'll try to do the best job we can and pass it on to our city council, and they're pretty detailed also, so they'll go through it also. But anything else, Mitch?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Commissioner Berg?
Just two questions, really. The first one is around the other requirements, and of the fruit trees and other flowering trees may not be sprayed. Are we referring specifically on that property, or are we talking about within a certain distance of the hive?
That's a good question. I would consider that as on
the property.
on the property itself. I don't think you could really regulate somebody else's property like that.
And that's why I asked, because thinking about Commissioner Snowbuck's question around enforcement, if you have a neighbor who all of a sudden gets really mad at your hive and decides to start spraying their flowers, in retribution for not wanting them there, it'd be interesting to have that outlined a little bit more in the ordinance around what that means.
Sure.
Secondly, just around the data, did we get any information from any of the cities around how many of these permits they've seen applied for and permitted so far?
Sure, so I did reach out, I only heard back from Lakeville as of today.
Yeah.
They enacted their ordinance in 2017 from citizen request, but they actually did not get their first approved permit until May of last year. They do have to go through the interim use permit process, so that requires a large public notification process. It's got to go to planning commission, then has to get approved by city council, and it comes to like a $500 fee. So it's definitely more of a process, but they only have one active permit since approving an ordinance in 2017. And they've had no complaints yet from that hive.
Okay. Great. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Got a few questions, and maybe they start down the road of what the commission's thinking about. What was staff's thought process on the initial request and, the process that you thought? I know with chickens, we started doing it as the commission public hearing and, we'd reach out to neighbors and then the neighbors would at least be notified. What was your thought on how this process would start and go? Would it be the public hearing or would it just be, because we modified the chicken one to now where it's more of a staff permit review?
I would be comfortable with modeling it after our current chicken ordinance where the adjacent property owners would get notified, but keeping it not where they don't have to come to a public hearing. But if that's something the commission would,
Well, I'm gonna ask them that,
Like
but
to,
that'd be my recommendation to the commission, that we have a similar process as we
Mm-hmm.
do with chickens, and that would be staff-led. Most of us went through the chicken public hearings, and yeah, maybe we'd get a neighbor, but usually it was just the applicant and maybe their children that would come because the children were the ones active, but is the commission comfortable with that?
How does that work? So like, you notify the neighbors, on like chickens right now, like just adjacent, because what happens if 2 doors down, they object to it? So they could object to staff, or
it's not necessarily giving them an opportunity to formally like object. It's more just an information letting them
More
know
notifying.
there is an approved permit at this property. If you have any questions about, what the permit itself is like, please reach out to city staff and we can better inform you of the requirements on that permit.
and I think it's, with part of that notifying those, residential neighbors, it couldn't hurt to have some sort of flyer in there or website, like to direct people to do their own research on it, saying, because again, most people think like, there's gonna be bees flying everywhere and they're gonna sting people and, because just the average citizen or resident, again, probably doesn't know.
Right.
Well, as a requirement, this beekeeper education, I think, is extremely important, and anyone applying should have some sort of, they should go through the online course or whatever it is, because then I would think that they could help speak to that or guide them to a location that they could do some research as well.
Yeah, just so the neighbors,
Yeah.
that there's gonna be people that object to it, it's just so they're aware, like, to help them ease their mind
Yeah.
on as far as bees, and having the fencing and barrier, I think, is key. I think that's important, because it, if you do have the neighbor that objects, it certainly puts them out of sight, out of mind,
And I agree with both comments, and Krista mentioned the education. What was staff's thought process? What were you gonna require if somebody were to come in next week and say, I wanna do this now because I heard you talking about it? What kind of requirements for education would staff say, this is what I'm looking for?
Correct. So I think, I don't know if I would have an exact, footprint of like exact documentation
Okay.
that they would have to provide, but I think, that's something we can further narrow down
Okay.
at a future meeting on what sort of, do we need to see a certificate of, or what sources are you getting your education from? That's something we can definitely narrow down.
Okay.
I
And I'm
mean,
gonna ask the commission for a consensus. You feel there needs to be some education, everybody?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, in
Okay.
fact, Egan has it outlined really well. In fact, I would follow that one pretty closely, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, this is the first blush on this. We'll
Right.
certainly have a draft ordinance before we even get to a public hearing.
Okay,
That way
maybe
we
getting a little
can
too
flesh
detailed,
out
but-
some of the specifics.
okay.
But yeah,
We'll keep moving then.
you'll have multiple
Yep.
shots at this ordinance.
Single-family residential zoning districts, would you include all of them? Would you include all of them?
I would include just the zoning districts that permit a single-family
Single-family homes.
dwelling.
Okay, so it'll have to be a little,
So it's,
when you write it, be a little careful, because you don't want to get
yep.
caught too much with, other ones. But I agree with you, I don't think I would do multi or anything like that.
Right.
So, okay. And I agree with Phil's thing about, a little, start out, the setbacks a little deeper than, maybe, rather than 10 feet, go a little longer than that. Commission agree? I mean, again, that's one of those things, Mitch, that you can always whittle back if you find out it's becoming too big of an issue. Staff, I'm sure, will come in and say, you know what, whatever they have, 25, 30 is too long, we need to go, go to something else. But I think let's not sell ourselves short initially, or else we're gonna hear it. Flyaway barrier, I understand that now. And I'll admit right now, I'm not a bee expert, so I'm going more by what staff goes, but the education, I agree with Krista. Let's see if I got anything else. I knew I had one on behavior. If the colony exhibits aggressive behavior, who's gonna determine? Is that gonna be kind of the beekeeper itself, or the neighbors, or what?
More than likely that would come through the neighbors.
Okay, and that's, I think, where maybe Mitch was going with,
Right.
other than the complaint, yeah. So. All right, let me cut that back. So I'm pretty comfortable with what the commission's already asked and done like that. We can go through, and if the commission's got any things, we're fine with the permit type. The process is what we talked about as staff. Zoning districts, single family only, the density, the location, rear yard, I think we're all in agreement with that. Staff is too. Setbacks, we talked longer the better, at least initially. Barrier or screening, I think that's laid out. Were you gonna go with all the types then, Jared, you're thinking?
Correct, so definitely, I think, there's definitely some just general termination that some of the communities have used where they're just requiring some sort of barrier, whereas Egan requires a barrier, and then they require it to run parallel 10 feet in both directions,
Yeah.
so giving it more protection per se, instead of just, wherever the hive is, just one single barrier and that's it, whereas they require a full length down that lot line. So if that's something that the commission would be more comfortable with too, I can add in extra language regarding that on the barrier. But yes, anything from some sort of wall, fence, dense vegetation, I would include that within the ordinance.
Thoughts by the commission, 10 foot too, at least start out with, or not?
I'm comfortable with that.
I think so too. Let's start there and,
10-foot in length,
yeah.
6 foot high.
Yeah, I think, let's start out again, it can always be shaved back, Source of water, what does that mean? What is it, a sprinkler? Is it a pond? Is it a what? I don't understand that.
So I think there's different ways you can do it. I'm not a bee expert, but I think there's certain equipment that you can insert in the hive that allows running water to be accessible right to the hive, or it's as
Okay.
simple as, providing some sort of little pool of water right next to the hive that
Okay.
they can access.
When I read that, I would assume it is so they're not searching out to find water in other people's yards,
Right.
Yeah,
right? So
swimming
that's why
pools.
you have it close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are these year-round hives, or do they close down in the winter?
So my brother happens to be a beekeeper, so they actually will hibernate for the winter, but they do have to go inside. So he takes his from the outdoor space inside of his garage, and they don't see them again until spring when it warms up again. So they do hibernate in the winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heated garage?
No, it's not. As long as it's protected from wind, they're fine. If it gets extremely cold, he sometimes will put a a heater out there, but as long as it's wind protected, they're
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Good to
Does he
know.
live in Minnesota?
Iowa, so.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough.
Interesting, all right, well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, you're
Do
welcome.
a field trip to visit his, I mean,
I'm sure he would love
yeah,
that.
I think we should look into
All
that.
right,
Love that.
behavior and beekeeping education, we said needs something, and Jared will decide what that might be. I think there needs to be some kind of inspection, Jared, I don't know what the commission thinks, but, you know, what, again, the neighbors may be upset and just not calling you, but I think there needs to be some kind of inspection at some point, just like we do with chickens.
Yes, and we would want to ensure that, you know, they're meeting the setback requirements, they've got the barrier in place, and just that, yeah, that they're meeting all the performance requirements
Yeah.
as well.
Any idea on this education part, does this, Minnesota Hobby Beekeepers Association, do they have people that would go out and inspect hives? Like, you know, I wonder if this is like a volunteer organization, or is it?
Sure, I definitely think between them, and I know the University of Minnesota has a big bee education program there too, where they have volunteers that you can have come out and, you know, provide education or ideas on, and I'm sure inspect it as well too, on if there's any problems.
And I just think for even this complaint-based system, you know, not that city staff can't learn it, but, you know, if you had one of those people out there saying, you know, this is the 4th complaint we've received on this, can you come out and tell me what's exactly, if something is wrong here, or is it just natural bees flying around, you know?
Right, no, that would be a great resource for sure.
I do know also that USDA, if you're going to sell the honey, they also require inspections of the hive site and things like that too. So that might be another resource that would be available.
I think about, all right, the last one I had is termination suspension, I think several commissioners brought that up, and we'll let staff noodle that before, but it'd be my impression that I think we should proceed with the draft ordinance, at least gives us something to look at and go from there. Commission agree?
Yes.
Jared, did you get enough information, or did you get too much?
Just enough, thank you.
All right, well, I don't know. All right. Appreciate everybody's questions and comments. Move on from there, we'll go into our second discussion item, that's the open meeting law. Tony, you're gonna take this?
I will take this, thank you. As this commission is a publicly appointed body, the commission does have to abide by the open meeting law requirements. So within your packet, there is a little additional packet, if you will, from the League of Minnesota Cities, kind of outlining what open meeting law is, what the requirements are, things that the commission can and can't do. Basically, open meeting law serves 3 vital purposes. The first, it prohibits actions from being taken at a secret meeting where the interested public cannot be fully informed on decisions that this commission would take. It ensures the public right to be informed, and it gives the public an opportunity to present its views on the subjects that are being discussed. There are a couple of high points that I do want to point out that are in your packet regarding open meeting law, basically some things that you shouldn't do. The first is avoid gathering in a quorum outside of a regular meeting. A quorum for this particular commission is 3 or more commission members. If a quorum is present at a social gathering, please do not discuss, decide, or receive information on city business. Dealing with serial discussions, so that would be discussions of less than a quorum that are happening more regular. Could be considered a violation of the open meeting law under certain circumstances, so avoid phone calls, emails, texts, and social media to discuss city business. In order to avoid that social media or meeting tag, try to have these discussions during regular meetings. There are a few exceptions to the open meeting law. Many of these deal with the city council for things such as labor negotiations. those they can have as a closed meeting, but they are few and far between. And then the last, any person who intentionally violates the open meeting law is subject to civil penalty up to $300 for a single occurrence. And should be noted that the public body does not pay for that penalty. That is on the person who does the infraction. So, those are the high points. Certainly read through the information. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. I can certainly discuss that further with you. It was just provided for your information this evening though, so that's all I got.
Any questions for staff on the open meeting law? Nope. All right. Is there anything else from staff?
I have nothing.
Anything else from the commission? If not, I'll remind our residents and viewers, our next regular meeting will be March 11th, and with that, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
We are officially adjourned, thank you.